Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now and started here. I guess you're going to see all of these pop-ups when people are trying to join. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for a webinar on saving money by buying green, brought to you by the Maryland Department of General Services, the Maryland Green Purchasing Committee, and the Responsible Purchasing Network. Please join me in welcoming the Deputy Secretary of the Maryland Department of General Services, Nelson Reichert.
Nelson, you're on mute.
Thank you, David.
I thought I had it off.
There we go.
Okay, start over. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. As Emily said, I'm Nelson Reichert. I'm the Deputy Secretary of the Department of General Services. I understand we're up to about 139 participants from the state, county agencies, the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Department of the Environment, some nonprofits, and some other state governments, including the state of Washington and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Welcome, and we're glad to have you here. The Maryland Green Purchasing Committee, which is chaired and staffed by General Services, is now in its 11th year of providing service to other state agencies. We're a very dedicated team led by Emily Soontorn-Saratol. We're proud to run such a collaborative program to leverage the state's buying power and, more importantly, to buy responsibly and sustainably. Shortly after the COVID-19 epidemic hit, the Green Purchasing Committee identified three main priorities: health, climate, and cost savings. Today, we're going to focus on cost savings. You will hear over the course of the program about some of the products available to the state. We're proud to report that last year, the state of Maryland purchased energy-efficient computers and light bulbs that will reduce our electricity bill by over $800,000. As you can imagine, $800,000 can be used in a lot of other meaningful programs for the state. Excuse me. We're also joined today by the Responsible Purchasing Network and members of our own Maryland Green Purchasing Committee to discuss how we can buy products that protect human health and the environment while saving money. I'm kind of fond of giving people nicknames within our staff, and I'm going to turn this back over to our guru of green, Emily, to get started. So, Emily, it's all yours. Thank you for everyone for joining.
Thank you, Nelson. We do have quite a large group today, so we're going to remind folks to please stay on mute, please, while we are presenting. You are welcome to keep your cameras off. It might make it easier to be able to focus on the who is speaking. And we will have some time to answer questions at the end of today's webinar, but you may enter them in the chat at any time. Today's webinar is being live streamed and it's also being recorded. I'm pleased to introduce to you our presenters today. Alicia Culver is the Executive Director of the Responsible Purchasing Network, an international network dedicated to advancing sustainable procurement policies and practices among government agencies, public institutions, and businesses. Alicia has over 3 decades of experience in sustainable procurement and has worked to help states and local governments across the country, including Massachusetts, California, Washington, Minnesota, and Maryland. We are very fortunate to have Alicia as a consultant and to have worked with her on Maryland's program for nearly 2 years. Today, Alicia will be presenting on some excellent examples of types of green products that can save you money, either upfront, per use, or through an item's life cycle, as well as cost savings concepts and strategies. Shirja is DGS's Sustainability Coordinator and also the key staff person for the Maryland Green Purchasing Committee. Shirja will bring in some examples of how Maryland has documented the benefits of our green purchasing program, including documenting cost savings from green purchasing. Shirja will also serve as our moderator for the question and answer portion of today's program. So as you're entering those into the chat, she will help direct them to us when we get to that. And I am Emily Soontorn-Saratul. I serve as the DGS Secretary's designee to lead the Maryland Green Purchasing Committee, which I've done for the past couple of years. Serving as your host for today's webinar, and I'll also be speaking briefly to introduce you to the concept of green purchasing and also our program in Maryland. It's important to note that today's webinar is a complement to a fact sheet developed collaboratively between the Maryland Department of General Services and the Responsible Purchasing Network. This resource is published online on DGS's website, and we encourage you to please check it out and use it as a reference for finding cost-saving green products on Maryland statewide contracts. And we're really glad to have a great turnout today. We had a high demand for this type of program. We have over 130 folks registered today, representing over 40 agencies and coming from a variety of roles related to the state's procurement of goods and services. So we have folks joining us who are budget analysts, who are looking big picture at the state's budgets. We also have executive and leadership represented. We have folks who are looking at a program level, approving purchases, as well as procurement professionals and folks buying on and off statewide contracts, including credit card holders. And so we'll start with some basics on green purchasing. So what is green purchasing? Green purchasing is the procurement of products and services that have a less reduced effect on human health and the environment when compared to competing products and services that serve the same purpose. Sometimes you will hear other terms for green purchasing, such as environmentally preferable purchasing that we sometimes shorten to EPP. It's all the same thing. Maryland's green purchasing program, as Nelson noted, is in its 11th year this year. It was established in 2010 by the Green Maryland Act, and that legislation established an interagency green purchasing committee. It is made up of 9 executive departments and the University System of Maryland. And it was established to do a number of things. It was established to promote environmentally preferable purchasing in state government, to provide education, training, and outreach, to develop and implement statewide policies, guidelines, programs, and best practices, to coordinate with other agencies, other federal task forces and commissions, to stay on the same page with other parallel efforts. Notably, to publish specifications for environmentally preferable products. And also we are mandated to report annually to the governor and legislature on our green purchasing activities in the state. Also important to note that by Maryland regulations, state agencies are required to buy green products, with the caveat that if they do not perform adequately, exclude adequate competition, or not available at a reasonable price in a reasonable period of time, you may get out of that requirement. There are a number of benefits to green purchasing. They include our ability to do our part to prevent or at least mitigate the effects of climate change, conserve resources like energy and water, protect forests and oceans and other natural resources, reduce pollution and waste, protect health of our employees, our staff and our citizens, and also to save money. When we talk about the costs of what we purchase, it can be helpful to visualize this as an iceberg. There is what we can immediately see above the surface, and there is what is below the surface that may not be immediately apparent. What we tend to see immediately is that initial price tag. What we may not see are all of these other things that can cost the state money beyond that initial price tag. So today, as we're going through this program, we're going to ask you to consider shifting your perspective when you're making purchasing decisions and thinking about costs in a larger and more holistic way. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Alicia to talk about some more specific examples of how you can do that. And Alicia, you are on mute, I think.
And there we go. Sorry about that. So welcome, everyone. It's really exciting to see over 100 people logged in right now to this webinar, which we know is a really important topic right now given the state of the economy. And it's been a pleasure working with you, Emily and Shirja, on developing and expanding the...
Alicia, you're back on mute.
Why did that do that? Okay. Okay, so I'll just say it's been a great opportunity to be able to delve into this topic in more detail because not only because of the state of the economy, but because there is a conception out there that green products cost more, and so we can't buy them. And so we're here to tell you today that that they're cost effective and represent huge opportunities for the state to save money. So I'm going to just dive right in. Next slide. When we're thinking about ways in which green products can save money, we're looking for those products. Some have just a lower cost right up front. Those are very easy to make that purchasing decision. Some are less expensive when you compare them on a per use basis. And I'll give you some examples of that, like concentrated cleaners, and we'll talk about those. Other products, as Emily mentioned, have what we call a lower total cost of ownership. That means when you look at the iceberg as a whole, you look at and factor in things like the product's ability to reduce electricity or water bills. Does the product last longer and therefore it isn't going to have to be replaced as often? Does the product have lower maintenance and disposal costs? So I'm going to give you some examples of this so you can really see how this concept plays out in real life. Next slide. So I'm going to start with those products that have just a lower upfront cost. Next slide. The state of Maryland runs a surplus property program, and it has its own property that maybe someone used for a short period of time and is still in good condition, or it also manages products from the federal government and distributes them to state agencies, municipalities, and nonprofit organizations. In 2020, over $1.2 million in federal surplus items were managed through Maryland's program and that were diverted from landfills and distributed to these entities. The common items that you might find through the surplus program include office furniture, electronics. You want to make sure they're still relatively new on those so that they're energy efficient. Same with appliances. There is some surplus food, and even items show up that we're not expecting that can be repurposed. So in 2020, there was some ethyl alcohol that was used by a municipality to manufacture its own hand sanitizer. So there's the link right there. There are lots of different products. They change over time, but that's a good way to save money. Surplus. Next slide. Another concept is remanufactured items. So there's remanufactured furniture, for example, that's available through Maryland Correctional Enterprises. They also offer a furniture restoration service. So say you have an old desk and you think, this is all scratched up, I don't really need it. You can send it to them, and for less than it would cost to buy a new desk, they can fix it up for you. They also can do a reupholstery and other services. So this is going to save money, keep things out of the landfill, and overall be a good service that might work for you. Next slide. Another concept of items that are lower upfront cost are remanufactured toner cartridges. So you have a toner cartridge and you get to the end of its life, and hopefully you're recycling it. And many of those cartridges are remanufactured into new cartridges. So what they do is they disassemble the cartridge, they look at it, make sure there's no broken pieces in the casing. They clean it out, reassemble it, put in any pieces, components that need to be replaced or upgraded. They refill it and test it to make sure that it gives you optimal performance. So these are purchased by many different government agencies, and the experience is that they cost about 20 to 60% less than the equivalent cartridge made by the original equipment manufacturer. So just for an example, Massachusetts, which has had a concentrated initiative to buy remanufactured toner cartridges from a local company in the state, also creating jobs there, saved in 2019 $1.2 million compared to buying the new toner cartridges. There are many different suppliers of remanufactured toner cartridges on Maryland's office supplies contracts. Next slide. The next concept I want to go through is lower cost per use. So we'll just go right into that. Also sticking with the toner and ink cartridge theme, there are some toner cartridges that are standard cartridges and some that are labeled high yield toner or ink cartridges. Products like high yield toner cartridges can save you money because they don't need to be replaced as often. So I learned about these actually by going into an office supply store, and I was looking at the different cartridges, and I saw that some of them had an X or an XL on them. And I asked the person at the store, what does this really mean? And they said, oh, well, a standard toner cartridge only is usually about half full with toner. You have to get the high yield one in order for it to be full. And I thought, okay, that's a new concept. So you can find the ones, there's no standardization on the labeling of that, but there's two ways to figure out if it's a high yield cartridge. One is to look at the label or the information in the catalog and see if it has a code like HY for high yield or ultra high yield. Long life X or XL or something else. Some of them will just say high yield. But probably the best way is usually on the package, it will tell you how many pages you can get out of that toner cartridge. And there's a standard testing method that they have to use for that. So let's go to the next slide and I'll show you how I did a calculation, a comparison for you. So these are two toner cartridges that are on your state contracts. These are the OEM, these are HP. You can also get these in a remanufactured version for even more cost savings. But the top one is a standard yield cartridge, 26A. And might look at it and say, okay, it costs $127 approximately. But when you look at the back of it, it says it has around 3,100 pages. And that calculates out to about 4 cents per page. There's the equivalent 26X cartridge, high yield cartridge, goes into the same exact equipment. It costs more, so you might discount it. But when you actually do the comparison, you see that cartridge has about 3 times as much pages that it will get. And so the price per page is about half. So especially for the equipment that you're going through a lot of toner and ink cartridges, high yield cartridges could save you a significant amount of money. Next slide. Another thing to think about is the idea of a concentrated product, concentrated cleaners, for example. So it's easy to just use sprays and wipes, but those cost more when compared to concentrated cleaning products. The city of San Francisco, I'm out here in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I do a lot of projects with them. So you'll hear about them a couple times here. They reported that that cleaners and aerosol cans, for example, cost about 27 times more than concentrated green cleaners. And green cleaners actually compared to conventional products are comparably priced because there's so many out there now. But if you buy the concentrates, you'll experience lower cost per use, and also you're going to have lower packaging and transportation costs because you're not shipping around a whole lot of water in those products. There are specifications that the Green Purchasing Committee has for green cleaners, typically looking at Green Seal and Safer Choice or Eco Logo. And you want to make sure, if possible, you get ones that work with automatic dilution equipment, which can make sure that you're using the products safely and the workers are not exposed to the concentrated cleaning chemicals. In the next slide, I'm going to show you how I did a calculation on this. So your preferred vendor for cleaning products is the Blind Industries of Maryland. And they have two products here. The top one, they're both glass cleaners. They're both Green Seal certified glass cleaners. They might look very similar to you when you're looking to order them. And the top one, you can see right at the end, it has this little 128. And what that means is you dilute 1 part chemical to 128 parts of water. So it's a highly concentrated cleaning product. The bottom one is the same exact product, also Green Seal, except that it's already diluted. And you can see actually in the code right above it, right at the end, it has an R. That means ready to use. That means it has already put all that water in there. So if we go into the next slide, I'll show you how to do the calculation. The top one, the concentrate, looks like it's more expensive. It's $20.52 for that 1 gallon. But because it's concentrated on a per gallon basis, because you can make 129 gallons, the cost per gallon, if you put the water in yourself, is about 16 cents per water. 16 cents per gallon. If you buy the one that already has the water in it, the ready-to-use one, it costs $6.60 per gallon. So it's better to buy the concentrates, and especially if you're using a lot of products, cleaning products in your facilities. Next slide. Rechargeable batteries have huge cost savings. You can replace a single alkaline battery with a rechargeable battery, but that rechargeable battery can be reused 500 to 2,000 times. So you replace 500 to 2,000 single-use alkaline batteries with 1 single rechargeable. And that results in the savings of hundreds of dollars over the lifetime of that rechargeable battery. One thing about rechargeables is people have tried them over time, and the Responsible Purchasing Network has been tracking their performance over the last decade. And I want to report that they're getting stronger, they're getting better, and so they're much more reliable today than they were 5 or 10 years ago, and they can reliably power many types of equipment like flashlights, computer mice, even those paper towel dispensers where you hold your hands up and then the paper towel comes down. So people go through lots and lots of batteries, and they're very expensive. Again, San Francisco took the lead on doing a report on high-performance batteries and testing them in their paper towel dispensers. And what they found is even though the rechargeables cost twice as much as the single-use alkaline, those are those D-cell big batteries, they last twice as long. So within a year, they actually paid themselves back, but they kept giving savings, the rechargeables, year after year. So if we go into the next slide, I can show you how we can do this calculation. It was a little bit of a busy slide, but what we're comparing here is single-use, your regular, batteries, alkaline batteries with rechargeables. They did a pilot test, and what was the most interesting thing that came out of it is they had expected that they would have to change out the rechargeables much more often than the single-use batteries. But what they found was actually the opposite. The rechargeables lasted about twice as long in the equipment and had to be changed out less often. So on the top, it shows that what they were using for single-use batteries in that paper towel dispenser, over a year, they had to change it out 5 times. So over the course of a year, those batteries, just the cost of the batteries, not including the maintenance costs, cost them $40. And over 4 years, since they've been doing the pilot test, they started in March of 2017, that in the paper towel dispensers that use the single-use batteries, they've paid about $160. For the rechargeables, they got one system. They got 8 rechargeables, so you can have one at all times in that charger. They actually hold their charge for a year, so if you could use that charger for multiple sets of batteries. But for this particular pilot test, the cost savings that they experienced was significant. So it costs $60 for the setup, but they keep using that same setup over time. So over the cost of 4 years, still we're at that $60. And so there's significant cost savings. There's other cost savings, again, the time and maintenance, also battery disposal costs, and just the time it takes to order the batteries and everything. So there's big cost savings with rechargeable batteries. Next slide. Refillable water systems are something that you can hook up in your buildings once the buildings are reopening, and they can replace expensive bottled water, only pennies per gallon for using a refillable water system. Next slide. I want to go into some of the life cycle costs, so to show some examples of products that have a lower life cycle cost. Next slide. So you might be saying, what is total cost of ownership and what are life cycle costs? So total cost of ownership is the purchase price plus any of the cost of operation of a product over its lifetime. So it could be delivery costs, so the cost to ship it, the installation, training costs, maintenance costs associated with the product. And then there's things like energy and water usage costs associated with the product. So you can think about it as a calculation where you're thinking about not just that initial purchase price, but all these other items like Emily talked about with the Iceberg. Next slide. The most easy and obvious product type that has a cost savings, and we heard about it from the Deputy Secretary, is energy efficient products. Energy Star program does the calculations up front, and they only put products on their list that have a really quick turnaround and payback. Usually the payback and costs, the extra cost between the less efficient and the more efficient product, means that you can get the payback in 1 to 2 years. But often the equipment will stay in operation for many, so you keep getting that payback. It's very easy if you're a purchaser or a specifier to find energy efficient products. The easiest way is to look for the Energy Star label. It's usually on the products. We're working with vendors to get them labeled in the catalogs, and Energy Star has a website which lists every product. So there's lots of different types, everything from appliances and electronics, electric vehicle chargers, lighting equipment, even water heaters and coolers and vending machines. So look for Energy Star products. Next slide. What you might not know is there's actually a top tier for efficiency called Energy Star Most Efficient, and you can find ones that are the most efficient within their class. Every year they nominate those products and they maintain a list on that website. Next slide. And all the links to how you find these products are actually in that fact sheet that Emily mentioned. A category of energy efficient products that the state has successfully purchased and already started documenting cost savings is energy efficient electronics. So there's an easy way to find energy efficient electronics, and so easy that the state actually passed a law saying that all electronics on Maryland's contracts must be EP silver and gold. So let me explain what that is. So there is a registry of sustainable electronics called the Electronic Products Environmental Assessment Tool, or EP. It's like the Olympics. It has levels bronze, silver, gold, depending on how many environmental attributes they have. All products have to be energy efficient to even get that bronze level, but they might have additional sustainability criteria of fewer hazardous materials, lead-free solder. The manufacturers have to offer take-back programs, but there's other different criteria, and you can search the registry very easily to figure out which ones meet which level and what specific criteria they have. Next slide. And Shira's going to talk about and give you a case study of how the state of Maryland actually did the calculations on energy savings for sustainable electronics. Another area, water efficient products, it's like energy. So there's a third-party certification that the Environmental Protection Agency maintains called WaterSense, and it certifies water efficient toilets and faucets and shower heads and irrigation equipment. So you can easily find those products. Next slide. So going back a little bit to the sustainable electronics, another opportunity for cost savings is to look at the paper that you're using, especially when we're all in those offices. We go through lots and lots of paper, and there are opportunities to reduce paper consumption, and there are a number of jurisdictions that have undertaken specific initiatives to try to reduce their paper consumption. One is the city of Seattle has a program called Paper Cuts, which I hate the name, but I always remember it. So you can come up with something a little bit different. But one technology is called multifunction devices. So multifunction devices mean that rather than buying a separate copier, printer, scanner, and fax machine, you get them all in one. So first of all, you save money because you're not buying 4 different pieces of machinery. Also typically uses a lot less energy than having 4 different things plugged into the wall. But these devices are optimized to be able to scan and email, so you don't have to print something out and mail it. You can fax it. They also easily do double-sided copying if you do need to copy something. There's just a certain number of systems that have to be set up to make sure people can do that easily, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. So for a paper reduction initiative, good way to start is to measure your baseline paper consumption and then set a goal. The communities that started this, the reason they did this is because they were using virgin, not recycled paper. They wanted to use recycled paper, and they said, oh, it costs 30% more. So how do we keep our costs for paper consumption to the same price without and still be able to buy the environmentally preferable product? And that was for 30% recycled copy paper. Luckily, that type of copy paper is now the prices come down, so you don't have that increased cost. That's it's comparably priced at this point. But if you wanted to buy 100% recycled paper, probably higher cost. So how do you justify that? You can say, okay, we're going to keep our paper costs at the same price. So once you set your goal, you come up with a set of practices, setting your equipment to default to that double-sided printing, having training. I've seen people put little notes next to the printer about how to use the scanning and email functions. I've seen the IT departments get involved and set that up on everybody's computer, and then eliminating inefficient desktop printers. So you can measure your paper consumption as you implement these different types of practices, and see if you're reducing it over time. You can look at different departments and see who's doing well or who might be struggling with it that might need a little bit of extra outreach assistance. The next slide is going to give you an example of another state, one of your neighboring states, New York, where they have undertaken a paper reduction initiative for the past decade, and they've documented over $64 million just in savings from reducing the copy paper that they used, including about $8 million in 2019 alone. So they've documented a 60% decrease in paper purchasing. That has also enabled them as part of this to buy 100% recycled paper, which they did by going out separately for that product and reducing the price of that product as well. So $64 million over 10 years, that's significant savings. Next slide. Thinking about products, we often don't think about the maintenance. Does a product require more maintenance or less maintenance in order to be operated? So here are a few examples of low maintenance products that you can consider purchasing. So vinyl flooring, now vinyl is toxic, and not only that, it looks really cheap, but some of the vinyl composite tiles require you to use floor polish and strippers over the life of the product. It can be once a year, a couple times a year, quarterly, and those chemicals are expensive, and they also take a lot of time, and they're very toxic. So it may seem to be more expensive to buy something like linoleum flooring, but those products don't require the same floor polish and strippers. So that's something where you can think about the life cycle of the maintenance cost of that product. Other examples include electric vehicles, which don't require oil changes and have lower fuel costs. Solar powered generators. We actually got one for our house out here because we have power outages, as you may have heard in California. But compared to like a diesel generator or propane generator, they don't need to be refueled. They don't need to be flushed out like those others. So even though they're a little bit more expensive, they have cost savings over time. There's also things like native plants compared to other plants. So if you're doing landscaping, ask your landscaper to provide native plants, which typically require less water, fertilizers, and pesticides. Next slide. I wanted to then package it all together with this example of a product category that has multiple cost savings associated with it, and that's lighting. It's one of my favorite product categories to work on. And so light emitting diodes, LEDs, are rapidly coming down in price, and their performance is improving over time, and they've been taken up by the Energy Star program, and so you're starting to see them more in hardware stores and things. They have a lower life cycle cost because they have lower replacement costs because they last a lot longer than conventional lighting. They have lower maintenance costs. Again, they don't have to be changed out as much. They don't have mercury in them, so they don't have high disposal costs, and they have significant electricity savings compared to incandescent and fluorescent lamps. So this little table at the beginning is from one of your vendors. It shows the bottom is an LED lamp, and it uses 15 watts, and it can replace a 100-watt incandescent light bulb. That's your typical, light bulb that has been used, like the one with the $sign in it, or it can replace even a compact fluorescent. Those are the ones that look like ice cream cones. Those typically, for the same amount of light, use 23 to 26 watts of electricity. And there's lots of LEDs on Maryland state contracts for electrical supplies, facility maintenance supplies. So in the next slide, I give you some calculations. This is got a lot going on, but I tried to highlight what's the most important in the red. So these are the three different light bulbs. Top is incandescent, the second is the compact fluorescent, and the third is the LED. And what we find is in the price per lamp, it is less expensive to purchase an incandescent or compact fluorescent light bulb. The replacement cost, though, that incandescent light bulb only has a rated life of 1,000 hours, whereas the LED, for example, has a rated life of 15,000 hours, or 15 times longer. Over a 5-year period, that first top light bulb would have to be replaced 8 times. So that would cost $34.08 in just replacement costs. So already just the replacement cost, the LED comes out ahead. On electricity, same thing. The electricity for that 100-watt bulb, based on Maryland's electricity rates, is $67 over 5 years, whereas for the LED, it's only $7, and the fluorescent light is in between. But we don't like the fluorescent light so much anymore because it uses mercury, and it actually also has a disposal cost at the end. So all the way over the right, the total cost of ownership of that incandescent over 5 years, if you just use those, is over $100, whereas the LED, the total cost of ownership is about $16. So you can see huge cost savings every time you change out one of those light bulbs. Next slide. I'm going to just end by giving you cost-saving green purchasing strategies to think about. Look for products with the longest warranty or purchase an extended warranty. Sometimes, especially for energy using products, there might be grants or utility rebates available. Use the state contracts whenever you can because they have negotiated prices for environmentally preferable products. If you're writing a new contract, look for ways to negotiate your deepest discounts on EPPs. Ask the vendors to do that. Put those products on your core list so that you get the best pricing. Purchase cooperatively, again, with state contracts if you're a local government, or even if you can team up with the state or other entities, you'll get better pricing on EPPs. And last thing, avoid overnight shipping. No, it's kind of tucked in there. It's buried under that iceberg, but it's very expensive to get something shipped overnight, and it has huge climate impacts. So that's one way that you can save money as well. I'm going to pass this back over to now to Kashirja Ramesh, and she's going to talk about how the state has been quantifying the benefits of its green purchasing program. The latest information on that is in the Green Purchasing Annual Report for 2020. Take it away, Shara.
Thanks, Alicia. So let's just get right to it and go to the next slide, please. Beyond the dollar costs we've talked about today, there are also societal costs associated with the things we buy. Resource depletion, pollution, impacts to public health. These costs may not be reflected in our budget all the time, but they matter too. Next slide. In Maryland, we have started to document not only the dollar cost savings of our green purchases, but also the other benefits that we experience that support our environment, our health, and our quality of life. So this information is represented in our annual report that you can find on our website. But just to give you a quick overview of what we saw in 2020, we experienced a total cost savings of over $800,000. We were also able to document a carbon emission reductions in metric tons, 158,159, which is about equivalent to taking a little over 34,000 cars off the road. So we documented these savings and benefits over 4 categories: electronic and IT products, lighting, copy paper, and renewable energy. Next slide. Breaking that down a little bit further, let's take a look at electronic and IT products. Here at the state of Maryland, we are required to buy EPEAT silver and gold products, and that means we automatically get those benefits associated from buying those products. This means we saw cost savings tied to energy efficiency, but also from reducing the amount of hazardous waste we have to dispose of. So as Alicia mentioned, and EPEAT certified silver and gold products, or EPEAT products generally, have less toxic material in them. So in the amount of electronic products that we bought, we saw 444 fewer bricks of hazardous waste. energy efficient and EP certified products also consume less materials. So we also saw that kind of material savings that directly impacts our natural resources. And of course, we have to talk about those dollars. So those dollar savings amounted just for that year, fiscal year 2020, $759,494. I put at the bottom of that slide, if you want to take a look later on, you can take a look at those EP calculators and kind of just run through those numbers yourself and see what you buy and see what kind of benefits you get, because it's really, really cool to see. Next slide. Okay, the next one, of course, lighting, Alicia's favorite topic. So from lighting, we also saw carbon emission reductions, about 519 metric tons for what we were able to verify and validate, which about estimates to removing 112 cars off the road for 1 year. Again, cost savings, of course, are there because we are talking about energy efficient products, right? So we experienced just for 1 year an annual cost savings of almost $62,000. Now, LEDs, as we've talked about, they kind of last longer, about 5 to 10 years more. And so we also experience a total life cycle cost savings to be an estimated value of $300,000 to $600,000 over the life of these products. Next slide. And remanufactured toner cartridges. So in the state of Maryland, this product category we did not include in our annual report this last time around, but we will be doing so moving forward and kind of looking at some of the other categories we've talked about, always growing and expanding what we're able to report on. So the state of Maryland, we were able to track 910 remanufactured cartridges that were purchased in fiscal year 2020. Yeah, this number looks a little bit lower or smaller, and I'm guessing COVID kind of helped with that since everyone's working from home. We're just having less purchases off of statewide contracts. As Alicia mentioned, a lot of the reman stuff, it's made from old materials or previous life cycles of the cartridge, right? So it's being reused and recycled, and that means we don't have to use new material, virgin material. So buying those 910 cartridges, we experienced 15,925 pounds of virgin material that was avoided in those products if we had bought new. Of course, reman is also cheaper to buy, and we estimate savings just in that year of about $44,000 or nearly $45,000. Next slide. Now, looking towards this future, right? Like, where do we want to see? In the webinar, we talked about the benefits of buying green, and we've seen it can actually save us money while still providing those benefits we expect from being an environmentally friendly purchase. And zooming out for a second, all those environmental benefits, right? Resource conservation, pollution reduction, carbon emission avoidance, it all ties back into the fight to keep our climate stable. As our governor recognizes, climate change is a credible threat. It can hurt our public health, it can cripple our economy, and as he says, when we face a threat to people's livelihoods and way of life, showing leadership means acknowledging the risks and addressing them. And that's exactly why the Green Purchasing Committee was created, to fight climate change, yes, but also to take advantage of the benefits buying green provides to our state. And now I'd like to pass it back on to Emily to bring us home.
Thank you, Shirajah. As you can see, there are a lot of benefits to buying green, including cost savings, and all of these other things that perhaps you didn't think about until today. And we hope that helps you to make the business case for buying green. We hope that you learned something new today that you didn't know before joining us for this webinar. And so we're going to ask you to take one moment and reflect on what you learned today. If there was one thing that is new to you, go ahead and type that into the chat. All right, well, hopefully, we hope that you have learned that there are upfront savings from some green products. There are products that may save you money per use, and to shift your thinking to consider per use savings as well as total cost of ownership, and how products may save you money over a product's life cycle. We also hope that you understand that there are actual examples of these, and there are ways that if you need to document how to prove those savings, that you may do so. So we've included some links to some calculators. We've shown you what some of those calculations look like, as well as some bigger, higher level strategies that you can use to employ across the board. And it sounds like, yeah, folks are responding. You're learning about the surplus program. Wonderful. That's a great program. About cooperative, the recycled printer, printer toner cartridges. Great. Wonderful. And yes, we will, this webinar is being recorded, as I mentioned in the front end of today's webinar. We have your email addresses since you did register to attend, and so we will follow up with you to share a copy of the presentation. And with that, we can move into our question and answer period. We still have about 8 minutes, so we do have time, although if we can't handle all the questions, get to your questions in that amount of time, I think all of the presenters are able to stay a little bit past 2 if you want to stick around afterwards. So we have it looks like we have some questions in the chat. Shira is going to begin to go through. We also, when we asked folks to register, had a question there if you had questions you wanted to put forward. So we do also have your questions that you already submitted to us. So I think I'll start with one of those that was interesting to me. And that question was, how do we make the business case for green purchasing in the instances that some green products are simply not less expensive, that actually are going to cost more? Alicia, do you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, sometimes you do that life cycle cost and it just doesn't pencil out. I would refer back to the law that says state of Maryland employees shall buy green products unless they're not reasonably priced. So if it's close, you still can make that case. You can also look at other types of benefits. That's doing more of like what we call a best value analysis. So maybe the green cleaning products, for example, are a little bit more expensive than the conventional, although many of them are comparably priced. So one thing, you can look around to see if you can find a comparably priced product. But the other thing is to think about, what about those hidden costs of the health of the workers, for example. So those things can be taken into consideration even if they don't fit into your equation. And then, look for ways to drive the price down. Maybe there's something available. Make sure you're checking the state contract for those products. And then, like we talked about with the paper, look at the overall price. Maybe within purchasing that category, there's a way to reduce consumption. So even within cleaning products, for example, maybe use microfiber mops and they reduce the chemical consumption overall. So there are ways to justify it as long as the green product is reasonably priced. If it's 10 times more expensive, then maybe you don't put it on the contract, or maybe you, offer both products and let the buyers decide.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I'd also like to say, our statewide contracts are a great resource for folks. So please do take advantage of them. And if you're looking at that fact sheet, we've tried to link wherever we can to make it as easy as possible for you to find those products in statewide contracts.
Emily, we had another question from before when we were doing registration, and that is for you. So what tools and resources does the state provide to support green purchasing? And tying into that, how can we use EMA to support green purchasing for the state?
Okay, so that's like two separate questions. I'm going to answer those separately. One is, we do try to make this as easy as possible for you. The Maryland Green Purchasing Committee is a resource to you. If you have not looked at our website, please do, because we have a number of resources there. And many thanks to you, Shirajah, for taking the lead on a lot of those resources and tools to make green purchasing easier for state agencies. So please look at our website. We have, for procurement professionals, we have published environmentally preferable purchasing specifications in a number of categories so that you may easily copy and paste them into your solicitations. Again, for the agencies, take a look at our statewide contracts because we are beginning to, we have and we will continue to green those contracts as much as possible. And with the purchasing power of the state, we will continue to get the best pricing for those items. The second question was about using EMA, and I will just say we are really looking forward to the future of using EMA to support our ability to promote green purchasing and make it easier for folks to conduct those procurements, to ensure that they are sustainable, and for us to be able to kind of track that and report out on that. I think we're still, you know, EMA is in this phased implementation, so we're not quite there yet, but in the coming years, we really look forward to taking full advantage of EMA functionality to make it easier for you. And we know it will make it easier for us for sure too.
Can I just add a couple things to that?
Absolutely.
We focused on the third-party certifications because the certifiers actually will list, in most cases, every single product that is certified. So if you decide that, oh, I want to buy a product with Energy Star or Green Seal, you can go to their websites and it'll show you, and you can do that verification really quickly. There are some other tools out there. One is aggregators. There's some aggregators that, so you don't have to go to each individual certifier together. UL Spot and this other one called Ecomedes, they put multiple certifiers on one platform so that you can search them all at the same time. That can save you time because your time is really important and your time is money as well. And so we want to, you know, the state is doing a great job at trying to look at all these tools and also is looking at its e-procurement systems. For Massachusetts, I saw Julia Wolf is on this. We're doing a project together to look at how do we make the verification faster, and we've been interviewing the e-procurement systems to look at that functionality and talk with them about how can they make it really easy to go on a modern e-procurement system and have that experience where you can see, oh, here we can filter for all the environmentally preferable products right in the e-procurement. Not there yet, but moving in that direction.
Thanks, Alicia. And I think we still have a couple questions, but how about we do our final slide or two and then come back to it?
Yes, sounds good. In case folks have things coming up at 2. So we will just wrap up the formal part of today's presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really, really happy to have such a good turnout and to be exploring, cost savings and to be working collaboratively with Responsible Purchasing Network. And it's great to hear so many people are also interested in this topic. If you have more questions, you'd like to reach out to us, our contact information is here as well as our websites.
Emily, it's also showing like a picture of some flowers, so you might need to go back in to put that slide back up.
Oh, no. Shira, is it the same for you?
No, I can see our contact information.
You can see it?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Oh, I don't know. Thank you. Okay. Hopefully folks can see this. Okay, and now just one final note. If you would like to get involved, please do reach out to us. The Maryland Green Purchasing Committee meets quarterly. Those quarterly meetings are open to the public, and we'd love your involvement. But I'd also like to say the vast majority of you who are here today are here because you have some role in this anyway. Maybe you didn't even know, but you are someone who is looking at budgets. Maybe you're setting budgets, you're approving purchases, you're managing procurements and conducting procurements, or you're buying products and services for the state of Maryland. And to you, I would say you have a very important role in all of this. The state, as we said, has a lot of purchasing power, and each of us has the power to make a great impact, one purchase at a time. So we hope that you walk away today feeling a little clearer on how green products can fit within your agency's budgets, and that you feel empowered to make those choices that benefit the environment, human health, and save us money. Thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful day. And again, we will stick around for a few minutes if there are additional questions. Thank you.
So we have a hand raised from Ligia. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Aceves, in case you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi.